Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Today is Friday, November 25th, and this is episode number 42. This is also the final main episode of the show for the year. We will be back just before Christmas with a holiday special, if you will. But yeah, there's been not a lot of news this week. As I've been saying over the past few weeks, we're getting to that time of year when everyone is shutting down. News is coming in slower than you would expect, slower than what normally happens throughout the year. With end of year awards and review season, all that sort of stuff, focus is really on all that sort of now. So news is not really a common thing this time of year. We do have game updates, season launches and all that sort of stuff. Like Sea of Thieves they kicked off their new season, Battlefield kicked off their new season, and a whole bunch of other things. So there is some news like that, but in terms of like big stories, there's not a whole lot going on. So yeah, excuse me. With all that said, it's probably going to be a shorter episode than normal, just because of the lack of things. But as this is the final episode of the year, we'll also go through the games of December, so you will get a chance to see sort of what is coming out over the next, month. Normally we do it the first show of the month, which would be next Friday, but we're not here for that one. So, but without any further ado, let's get into it. We're going to talk about Skate. So, it's been a couple of years now since the reboot of the Skate series from EA was announced. They first announced that it was the developer Full Circle. They started up a new studio. So even though they say it's developed by Full Circle, that's like saying, Madden is developed by, Tiburon Studios. It's still an EA studio. But Full Circle is the development house doing it. And then it was probably back in the middle of the year, or probably a little bit earlier than that, they dropped a trailer saying, hey, yeah, no, we're still here, we're still working on it, because they had to staff up and all that sort of stuff. And they were doing pretty well with that. People were happy with it. And then back in August, late August, I think it was, they hosted a thing they called the Boardroom, for a skateboard. And it was basically just a chance for some of the developers to sit down and talk about the game. Late last week, they also hosted the second episode. So these aren't like every week sort of things. This is the second one in, 4 months. So it's not a very common thing. What they did talk about in it, though, is, what they're doing in terms of the foundation of the game, what makes skate, how the tricks are going to focus, how, what you can do when you're off the board, which is sort of a thing that was big around that time, with Tony Hawk doing it, and then obviously the Skate series as well, getting off the board and running around and climbing up and doing all sorts of stuff was very, very popular for a number of years. So that's sort of the highlights. The full episode is here. As I said, it is a full video. But I just wanted to highlight this thing. Let me just fix that up there. So this is like pre-alpha stuff. This is no way final. Animation. You can see the half the textures aren't even there yet. But this is just giving viewers an idea of what they're looking to do, how the controls are coming together, how the physics are coming together, things that you can do with your board, off your board, all that sort of stuff. And, would have been better if it was like a proper trailer? 100% yes. But that's not the point of this. The point of this was to show, it's still in development, there's still a ways to go before it releases. But they are doing a lot more than just, making Skate 4. Which again, that's what people would have been 100% happy with Skate 4 and nothing else. But they're using this as a chance to, really test themselves out, really give themselves, a full challenge that, comes along with when you reboot a series. So yeah, I think it's cool. As I said, like this was included in the actual, full presentation, which is, as I said, down the bottom. It is interesting, that they're doing these things, without any sort of cadence. This is the second time EA have done this. they did it with Dead Space. Dead Space dropped one like a year ago. They talked about, you know, what they were aiming to do with their gameplay. And then, you know, it was 5-6 months later, they did another one where they talked about the audio. And then they went silent again. So I'm hoping this is going to be a you know, a pretty consistent thing now from EA, because them doing this sort of thing is really sort of just letting the developers talk about things. And it's not... excuse me, it's not the sanitized, you know, in Skate you can do this, you know. It's just like, oh, you know, we thought about this, and, you know, we thought, well, why can't we, you know. So it's a real natural conversation. It is, if you're a fan of the series and you're, you know, hanging for this new installment, then it is definitely worth checking out, because I think it is you know, quite an interesting looking thing. The other sort of big thing that came out from EA this week was the first proper gameplay of Need for Speed Unbound. So Need for Speed Unbound was only announced like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, if that. It is coming out next week, so it's really, really close. But the thing with it is, you know, they dropped the release trailer. They said, hey, this is what we've got. They dropped a excuse me. They dropped, you know, the soundtrack. They dropped some of the cars, you know, the customization. They've done everything except show off the actual gameplay. And this week they finally did. Now, I'll just play the gameplay clip here. It is very interesting because I said this to somebody recently. The more I see of this game, the more it reminds me of SSX on tour. I'll get to one in a moment, but so this is the big thing. So meetups are the big thing. You know, it's proper car culture. It's not just you go to a smoke flare on the ground or whatever, and, you know, you're in a race. You have to go to a meetup, and then when you go into a race, they'll show it a bit later in the video. You can actually challenge a specific racer, a specific driver in that race, and say, hey, I'm going to bet you $2,000 that I'll beat you. You can go for the person, you know, who's in the first place at the start, you know, at the starting line. You can go for the person who's just one ahead of you. So the more you, you know, bet, the bigger the rewards are. But obviously, if you lose a lot of money. The whole reason why betting is important is because in order to, you know, get noticed and get access to the big events, you have to have, you know, wins behind you, but you also have to have, you know, a nest egg to say, yes, you are a serious racer. You're not just some guy who has, you know, a fancy car. But the whole SSX thing, I'm a big SSX fan. And when SSX, the series, you know, came out, they had the original one on PlayStation 2. Then Tricky came out on all the consoles at the time. And Tricky was the one that, you know, blew everyone's mind. Then they turned around and they did SSX 3, which I thought was fantastic. And, you know, open world snowboarding game. It was great. And then they took a weird turn with SSX on tour, in that, you know, they put in this sort of punk rock, graffiti, all over the place aesthetic, which is very much what I'm seeing here. Obviously, it's a little different, you know. This is, you know, they're not on skis and snowboards for one, but more to the point, you know, the big thing with that one was, you know, see the wings there, right? You know, the car got air, so, you know, there were wings, you know, speed lines when they boosted, all that sort of stuff. That was the sort of thing that On Tour did, and it really annoyed me that that's what they were doing in that game, because to me it was the gameplay that made SSX. It was, you know, pulling off the trick, you know, and then having to land and not stack, you know, so you were getting good air, getting back on the ground and not rolling over, and, you know, all this stuff. All the extra stuff on the sides of the screen, you know, to say, hey, you know, somebody just wiped out, you know, or, you know, skull and crossbones appeared when that happened. That was never fun for me because it distracted from the actual game. And I suspect this is going to be a similar sort of thing. Now, you can turn these off. You don't have to have all these effects on, which I'm very grateful for. But that being said, you know, the you know, flames and the smoke and all that will always be on, because, you know, if you do a burnout, you're going to generate smoke. It's literally how it works. So sometimes it's going to be on and you're not going to have to deal with it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm also worried that this game's being pushed out the door. I'm not going to say without, you know, fanfare, because, you know, we got the reveal, we've got the car systems, the betting system, the effects, which I was just talking about. and the soundtrack, and there's that whole thing with that singer guy, $8 AP, whatever, I don't know how you pronounce that thing. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like they're sending it out to die, if you will. And it could be the most amazing game in existence. It could be absolutely phenomenal. But I don't believe that's the case. I think they've gone out of their way to create something that's... They're trying something new, and I think, management don't really believe in it, which is why it's, been announced and pushed out the door within a few months. I'm totally okay with that. Fallout 4, for example, was announced at E3, released that November. But, there's a difference between a game being announced, at E3 and releasing at the end of the year, to a game being announced in September and releasing, the first week of December. It could be, vastly different, and I'm hoping it is, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to be that way. I think it's going to be a less than ideal thing for players, but who knows? Maybe I'm very wrong with it. However, sticking with the car or the racing theme, Mario Kart has finally announced the release date and the lineup for the third course in their booster course pack. So, if you're not aware, early this year, was in the February Direct, Nintendo announced that there would be a thing called the Booster Course pack that was coming to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which would add another 48 tracks to the game, doubling the track count. So Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, when it launched back in 2017 on the Switch, it came with 48 tracks. This is now doubling the overall thing to give you 96. The only downside to these is that they're throwing in the ones from Mario Kart Tour, which are based on Sydney, Los Angeles, Tokyo. In this one, we have a Berlin one and a London one. And, they're fine for mobile gaming, but, they're not good regular Mario Kart tracks for me. However, we now actually know when this is coming and what's included. So, the pack will launch on December 7th. Generally speaking, these things launch around 11 o'clock in the morning. I say that's when they do. That's when the last two have done. So we'll probably say maybe 11 or 12 now with the time zone differences. May not be the case. They could launch at 6 in the evening. They could launch at 1 in the morning. We really don't know. But just generally speaking, around 11, 12 in the morning. Included two cups, the Rock Cup and the Moon Cup. The Rock Cup includes London Loop, which is from Mario Kart Tour, Boo Lake, which is from Mario Kart Superstar Circuit from the Game Boy Advance, Rock Mountain from Mario Kart 7 on the 3DS, and Maple Treeway from Mario Kart Wii from the Wii. Moon Cup is the second one, and it includes Berlin Byways, which again is from Mario Kart Tour, which is a mobile game, Peach Gardens from Mario Kart... I can't remember if that actually had a subtitle. I think it's just Mario Kart DS, from the DS. Merry Mountain is another one from Tour. So there's 3 Tour tracks in this. I don't like those. And then Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 7 on the 3DS. Let me just pop this trailer on here. Again, so the thing with this Booster Course Pass pack, whatever you want to call it, is you can't buy the waves on their own. So if you only like Wave 5, for example, when that's announced, you can't just buy Wave 5. You have to either buy the entire pack or none at all. If you are a Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack member, i.e. you have the Nintendo 64 games and the Mega Drive games in your library, this is included. It is part of that system. So if you're already paying $80 a year for that, you don't have to then spend another $35 to buy these. But if you do cancel that subscription, access to these is removed. The thing with these tracks is that they're not as vibrant as the mainline tracks. So, this is Rainbow Road from the 3DS. There's a bit of a moment where they'll be driving on the surface of a moon. It's very inspired by Galaxy at the time. And, the track itself is fine. I thought it was a great track on the 3DS. The problem is there's a difference between these tracks and the originals, is that they're just lacking the detail, right? It especially shows when you're looking at the tour tracks. The tour tracks, like here you go, this is Berlin. The tour tracks are very simplistic because, you know, they run on mobile devices. And, you know, some people will argue that, you know, the newer iPhones and the newer, you know, Android phones are more powerful than a Switch. But, you know, not the ones from 5 years ago that they still have to support. So they have to do a broader thing. So their art style is less detailed because of it. And unfortunately, that less than stellar art style, you know, not less than stellar art style, I shouldn't say that. I should say it's more akin to, you know, the lack of detail in things is carrying across. It's really just a bad look. You know, if you compare, if I go back to the start here, in Wave 1, Wave 2, here we are. In Wave 2, there's a course here that's based on a Super Nintendo track. We already have one of those in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe by regular. If you compare those side by side, it's like looking at a game that was made, you know, for, you know, the GameCube compared to a game made for the Switch. The detail is just not there. And this is the same thing that they're doing with these new tracks across the board. So, you know, we do have a few screenshots of the new tracks. You know, so this is the London one. You know, again, I'm not a fan of the Tour tracks. I think Tour is a bad game. The fact that, you know, they've cut out a lot of the random gotcha stuff from it, you know, even though that, you know, that was making them money, people weren't happy with it. The controls are simplistic, the racing is basic. You know, in worst case scenario, you know, most races are over in a minute and a half. You know, it's really bite-sized gaming. You know, it's like this track is from the Game Boy Advance version, which is probably the game that most people forget exists. You know, everyone remembers the Super Nintendo because that was the first one. Everyone remembers Mario Kart 64 because it had the multiplayer. You know, Double Dash had the 2 races. You know, and that's sort of, everyone has their favorites of the more recent entries, but the Game Boy one is the one that's usually just left, you know, on its own. That being said, Merry Mountain. This is again a tour track, but this is one of those sort of original ones. It's not based on a city location, so it does have some more vibrancy to it. It's not perfect, but it you know, it looks a bit better than, you know, the Berlin track, which is also included here. And as I said, Rainbow Road. You know, if you compare this Rainbow Road to, you know, any of the other Rainbow Roads that already exist in Deluxe, you know, these gates are the same, right? But the texture is different here. The background's not as vibrant, right? Everything just has a little bit of just lacks some shine, I suppose is the best way to describe it. It's, again, not a horrible thing, but it is, you know, what it is. Moving away from the racing world, we're going to take a step into World War I with the first proper gameplay for the Great War Western Front. So the Great War Western Front, that's the full title, is based on literally the Great War, which is World War I. What is happening with this one is it's actually being developed by a studio called Petroglyph. Petroglyph was founded by a whole bunch of former Westwood developers. Westwood was the studio that developed for many years Command & Conquer. When EA wanted to celebrate the anniversary of Command & Conquer, they went to Petroglyph and said, hey, you guys know this series, can you remake, you know, all the games in this collection, you know, upscale all the assets, all that sort of stuff, and you can swap back and forth between them. So Petroglyph, you know, they know their RTS, their history, you know, when they were Westwood, you know, there's people from where Westwood are RTS. So the Great War Western Front is an RTS title. Now, we've actually had a look at some of it before, you know, with a brief sort of teaser back from, I want to say, a Future Game Show. You know, there's so many of those things lately, who can keep up? But, you know, we actually now have an extended gameplay look for it. Now, the big thing with this is that the game is actually played out in 2 levels. You can actually do the full, you know, I'm in charge, I'm doing everything, you know, myself, you know, down in the trenches, if you will. let me just jump into it a bit so we can see some gameplay. So you can actually, take control and get in. It's not shooter or anything, still an RTS, but you can get in and actually do all that. Or you can focus on a high level. So instead of being like a squad commander, you can be like the theater commander. And you can actually then start making decisions, that, I'm going to pull resources from the front line of the Belgium, campaign and put them down in France, right? Which can, seriously modify how, the people back home perceive the war. It can leave you open to, being exposed. And you can see here one of the skill trees, and how you do it. So if you, go into trench, for example, you can then make deeper trenches, longer trenches, so the trenches can be dug faster. So you can do all these sort of decisions, and by researching trenches, you may, have, say, you can dig trenches faster, which gets your guys off the line, off the field and out of the line of fire quicker. But that means you may not have invested in, engineering. So your tanks, may not be as, reliable, or your weapons may break down faster, stuff like that. So it's you really have to balance it. And that's if you're at the theater level. If you want to jump in and actually dive into the battles, like this is what we're seeing here, you're making these decisions about where are my trenches going, what enemy emplacement, what machine gun emplacement am I putting here, right? This is the full RTS thing. So it isn't, it's not coming out for a while. It's still a year and a bit off, if not late next year at the earliest. But it's doing something different for an RTS. It's not just, here's your squads, here's your resources. It's giving you, control over the two aspects and letting you pick how you want to make those decisions, right? You can jump back and forth between the two. So you can make the decision to say my trenches are going to be bigger. And then you can take, the advanced trenches and go into the battles and then start actually making use of them. But, the war doesn't stop. So if you're focusing in on the actual, trench combat, everything's still happening elsewhere. So you sort of have to pay attention to both. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting looking game. The fact that we do actually have more details for it, I think is pretty spectacular. Speaking of details, we also got a first look and confirmation on The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and its next gen development. Now, I talked about this last week that they were, they announced the date for it, and I've said a few times now, it's the next gen offer, next gen version of the game. It is coming to PC, this enhanced version. The next gen version is just the easiest way to call it. But we actually finally got a trailer for it. So let me just throw the everything up here. So the big thing with this, this is The Witcher 3 with the Blood and Wine and the... Oh, what's the other one? The two expansions, all the DLC, right? It's that whole complete package. It's obviously now in 4K. It's running at 60 frames a second. It's got, advanced lighting, advanced physics. So everything looks, prettier. The problem is, though, it's still just the same game that was released, back on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and on Switch. So it's the same game itself. There are gameplay enhancements, so they've fixed up bits and pieces of things that were broken. They haven't just made a prettier game. They've, made changes where those changes were needed. But it's still just a more, prettier version of a game that already exists. If you do already own The Witcher 3 on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or PC, you get upgraded to the next-gen version for free. So if you own it on PS4, you don't get the Xbox Series X version for free, and vice versa. If you have it on Xbox One, you don't get the PS5 version for free. It's the same account, same platform family. I said PC owners, they'll get the upgrade as well. The interesting thing though is that Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Switch owners are going to get content as well. They're getting some slight fixes here and there, but they're also getting content based off the Netflix show, which I was literally seeing on the screen as I was talking about it. So they're getting, the outfit that Henry Cavill's Geralt wears, right? The Nilfgaardian and Rodanian soldiers will have armor that's inspired by the show instead of the traditional game thing. So there's just a lot more sort of going on for it. There's the whole bunch of things. There's a photo mode now, so you can do photos, which is something you couldn't do in the other one, in the original release, sorry. There's some mods in there, so some quest fixes, and the DLC. Cross progression is also in there. That's not in the trailer, but that's something they brought in with Cyberpunk. So if you do have, say, The Witcher on PlayStation 4, and you now want to play it on PC, if you have access to a PlayStation 5, you can upgrade and all that sort of stuff, but your progress will actually go back and forth between them. So if you game at your PC on some days, but you game in, say, a home theater on the weekends, you can keep carrying your progress back and forth. You're not sort of stuck to one anymore. They did release, these 2 static screenshots, showing, just how the game looks. I don't have anything to compare them to, so I don't know how, different they are. But yeah, it is there. Obviously, it is something that I think is very cool looking. How it shakes out in the long run, we'll have to wait and see. I put in 150, 160 hours into The Witcher 3. On the Xbox version when I reviewed it. I put in maybe 60 or so hours on the Switch version when I reviewed it there as well. So I definitely have some fun memories of the game. Will I dive back in with this an overall enhanced version? Probably not. I might give it a go just to see what it looks like, but I'm not going to worry about doing anything more than that. Thankfully, my save file from my Xbox will work on the new version, so I won't be stuck back at, level 1 Geralt, which is something that always annoys me when they re-release these games. Speaking of games getting things, Nintendo have finally dated the golf update for Switch Sports. So we knew this was coming before the game was even released. They announced, 2 updates. One would add the ability to kick the soccer ball in matches. That came earlier in the year, and the other one, which was supposed to be out in the start of spring in September, was the golf update. They announced, this, as I said, when they announced the game. Why it wasn't included, we'll never know, but they finally announced that it is coming on November 29th, which is next week. The big thing with this, though, this is just the brief thing from the more recent Direct. These are the same courses from the Wii version. So not Wii Sports specifically, but Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. These are not original. So the fact that it's taken so long for this to come out and they haven't even remade, new courses is made new courses, I should say, is a bit of a letdown. What we do know though is, they all look, nicer because they're on the Switch. They, you can see the Spoko Square, branding, which is where all the other sports take place. It looks fine. But it's just golf. You wouldn't expect it to look anything different than that. The big things, though, Nintendo of Japan were the only ones to release actual screenshots, so that's where all these have come from. But the controls are with the swinging exactly like they were in Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort, so there's no difference there. And Wii Sports Club as well on the Wii U. So it's just now with a Joy-Con instead of a Wii Remote. There's literally no other difference. Same thing. The amount of power you put in the swing, how your Joy-Con is rotated will direct how much power you put into it and, the direction that it goes. The other thing too is, there's now a topography layer that you can apply to the green, so you can see, the lighter color means it's up higher, the darker color means it's down lower, so you can see that this one it's a little, higher over here compared to low here, but it's much higher up here, so you have to give it a bit more oomph. And obviously you can see how it goes darker in the back as it goes away. That means it goes downhill, so you have to sort of account for the potential roll of the ball, just like you would in real life. This is now in this one. The thing that really annoys me though is that the multiplayer for this is survival golf. Now I'm not opposed to that. I think the whole survival concept is great. They did it with the bowling. You're one of 16 players. At the end of the first 3 rounds, the lowest 3 scores get booted and all that sort of stuff. This is very similar. At the end of each hole, the player with the highest stroke count, because golf is the only sport that goes the other way, where the lowest score is the winning score. The player with the highest stroke count is eliminated. You can do, local, just regular things, but there's no online regular golf, right? You can't host a golf tournament and do 18 holes, or at least they've not said anything about that. Which is honestly one of the biggest problems that I had with Switch Sports, is that there was you either played locally with somebody, with family or friends, or you played the online option that they provided, and there was nothing you could do about it. You couldn't play, a round of 10-pin bowling with a friend online, right? They either had to be in the room with you, or you had to do survival bowling. And it's when they announced, survival golf for this, I was like, okay, that means they're doing it. And when they, confirmed the date, they said, no, that's all we've got. That was the exact same problem that, that was the reaction that I had then was, okay, they're doing the same thing. When I mentioned this to somebody at Nintendo about how, the lack of options in this game is insulting, they said, yeah, but this is a game that's aimed at the casual gamer. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but there's a difference between, being, a game for everyone, from the casual gamer to the hardcore gamer, and a game that's limiting the options because the developers don't want to put the time in to make them. There was a whole bunch of those, not the what asks, but that sort of thing that was released after the game launched, where the developers said they didn't know what they were doing in some instances, right? There was a newer team building this, and I have no issue with new developers, but it's like every other game on the market that does sports, right? They focus on a sport, right? We have Madden every year, we have FIFA every year, or whatever it's going to be called going forward. There's NHL. We now have the PGA Tour series from 2K. There's one of those on Switch. And if you're a sports fan, if you're into tennis, right? There's Australian Open tennis, match point tennis. Ironically, both developed in Melbourne, Australia. But we have these dedicated sports games, and most of them do exist in some variants on Switch. The only sport that's not referenced, the only sport that doesn't exist on Switch at the moment is Madden, and I don't see that changing. But my point is that if you want golf, go pick up PGA Tour 2K21, which is the only one that 2K released for Switch, right? Sure, there's 5 or 6 different FIFA games, but you can pick up FIFA 18 for a few bucks, and that's a fully featured fully featured soccer game. So they all have these different. There's all these more richer sporting experiences. So this is the only one that's sort of like, yeah, okay, cool. You want to do bowling and golf? Sure, this is the game for you. But they're still not offering the full breadth of modes that they should be. Now, I'm not saying we needed an online tournament mode, customizable characters beyond, the general look that they have here, or anything like that. I'm just saying that, if Nintendo wanted to compete more with other sports games, they needed to offer up a bit more than they did. The development time they put into Chambara, which is honestly a stupid addition to the game, that could have been put anywhere else. We could have had golf in as a day one release, but instead we got Chambara. Now the other thing too is in Japan they have announced a bundle with Switch and the game and the leg strap and 12 months of online. No word if that's going anywhere outside of Japan, which is funny because Japan was the only country that didn't have Wii Sports packed in with the Wii. Europe, America, Australia, New Zealand, and everywhere else the Wii launched all got Wii Sports as a pack-in game, but in Japan they had to buy that separately. So it's kind of funny that at the moment Japan's the only country getting a pack-in of Switch Sports with a console. But yeah, that was a little ranty, I know, but I'm sort of with the way Nintendo's doing things with their games for post-launch support, they really need to work things out. Moving away from that though, moving into the world of music, we actually have some news for A Plague Tale Requiem. So earlier this morning, at the time of recording, A Plague Tale Requiem developer Asobo Studio and publisher Focus Entertainment hosted a concert on YouTube. They recorded it previously. They just uploaded it for the world to see. And it's a 45-minute concert, and it is just dedicated to the music from the game. Now, it's obviously not every piece of music from the game. If it was to be played at like 400%, it would be the worst thing to hear in the world. But this is literally just a celebration of the music from A Plague Tale Requiem. The game's composer, Olivier I can't pronounce that. He did the music for the first game. He's done a few other games over the years. He's a very well-known French composer, which, given the studio that made it and the publisher is both French, makes sense. So it is here. Obviously, I will post the story in the chat, so if you are watching on Twitch, you can follow along. But they also announced that the soundtrack is getting a vinyl print on this sort of gold marbled, disc set. It's 2 discs. There are 34 tracks, and there's the full list there. Now the actual set is €35 for the vinyl, which is fairly affordable as far as these sort of prints go. And they do ship to Australia, but it's €28. So you're looking for almost twice the purchase amount just to have it shipped here as well. So sorry, you're looking to double the amount if you want to have it ordered and shipped here to Australia from the makers. At the time when I looked this up, it was still in stock, so there's not an issue there. But yeah, I had a quick listen earlier. I'll probably put it on play a bit later tonight. The music was one of the highlights from the game, mostly because it didn't have the little brother whining all the time, and Alicia just ignoring everyone because she decided she didn't like them. They made her brother cry. But yeah, it is some beautiful music, so if you are a fan of that, be sure to check it out. Finally, we're just going to talk about the games coming out in December. Now, as I mentioned, the games in December, there's not a lot of them. Generally speaking, most games sort of stop sort of the week before Christmas. We generally don't get anything in that final week before Christmas, and there's never anything after Christmas and in till January. So this is a much shorter week than we've seen. Shorter month than we've seen, but there's still a fair bit happening with this one. So on December 1st is next Thursday, we will see Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered come to Switch, PC, PS4, PS5, and mobile devices. This is another one of these Square Enix, where we're making it work on modern consoles, updating a few, sprites here and there and calling it a day titles. It's there. It is what it is. For VR players on December 1st, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 Retribution will be launching on Oculus Quest 2. Now, you will hear people call it the MetaQuest 2. It is not MetaQuest, it is Oculus Quest. And I know that because mine has Oculus Quest branded on the side of it, just because they changed their name. I'm not going to follow that. On the 2nd, this is the big day for the month, we see Need for Speed Unbound coming to PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. The Callisto Protocol will be launching on PC, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S on the 2nd of December. And finally, Marvel's Midnight Suns will also be launching on December 2nd for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X and S. This game is also coming to PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, but that'll be sometime in 2023. There's no date for it yet. On December 6th, we'll finally get the release of Hello Neighbor 2, which is coming to PC, Xbox, and PlayStation platforms. As you can see by the thumbnail there, it is also a Game Pass Day 1 release. On December 9, Switch will get the only Switch exclusive game for the month, and that is Dragon Quest Treasures. That is just coming out on December 9th. This is a spin-off of Dragon Quest 11, because it uses some of those characters, but they're younger and it's before that, it's a whole thing. But that's there as well. On December 13th, we will see the release of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, which is the remake of the former PSP exclusive Crisis Core. This is the game that sort of tells the story of everything that happened before Final Fantasy VII. Unlike Final Fantasy VII, which is PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC exclusive, this is also coming to Xbox One, Series X and S, and Switch. So, it still looks the same on Switch. The screenshots are, they're not as sharp as, say, the PlayStation 5 version, but, the models are the same and all that. So it's interesting that, Final Fantasy VII isn't on Xbox or Switch, but, the prequel game for it is. The 13th will also see the release of High on Life for PC and Xbox. This is, exclusive for those platforms. This is from Squanch Games. They're the folks that have done Trover's Tale, Trover's Quest. One of those things. But also, the studio was founded by one of the co-creators of Rick and Morty and Solar Opposites. Justin, whatever his name is, I can't think of it at the moment. The 14th, as I said earlier, we'll see The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt come to Xbox Series X and S and PlayStation 5, and obviously PC players will get the upgrade as well. And then finally, on December 22nd, Valkyrie Profile Lenneth will finally get its PS4 and PS5 release. While this will be available to buy on its own, people who purchased the Collector's Edition, or the Digital Deluxe Edition, I should say, for Valkyrie Profile, Valkyrie Elysium, back in September it was for PlayStation, sorry. It was early in November for the PC release. This was meant to be included as a bonus then. Day and dates, he was supposed to get Valkyrie Elysium, which is the new game, and then Valkyrie Profile Lenneth. That, didn't happen for whatever reason. They needed extra time with it, so they delayed it till this month. Obviously, though, we're on a cusp week. Next week there will be a few days of November left, and then obviously a few days of December. So in addition to the games of December, the games that are coming out next week include Soccer Story, which is coming to all platforms on the 29th of November. That is, like Golf Story, but for soccer. The 30th of November will see the release of Front Mission First Remake for Switch. That is a Switch exclusive. Gundam Evolution is coming to the PlayStation and Xbox console families on that day. It is currently available on PC, but there's a catch. It's technically not available for release in Australia at this point. There's no planned launch for that game in Australia because it's so server-based. If you do manage to acquire it, it may not work because it is an online multiplayer game, and it does require you to be on servers, and if there's no servers locally, the lag time may not be in your favor. The 30th will also see the release of The Outbound Ghost for PlayStation 4 and 5. The same game is coming to Switch on the 1st, so a day later. Sword of the Vagrant will see release on Switch, PS4 and Xbox One on the 30th. And then finally, Warhammer 40,000 Darktide will get its release on PC. It is also launching in a PC Game Pass. The only other day we haven't covered already in the games for the month, on December 1st, as I said, The Outbound Ghost will come to Switch. Inscription will get its Switch launch. It launched beginning of the year on PC, then came to PS4 and PS5 in the middle of the year, so now it's Switch's turn. And as I said, the Saints and Sinners game is there as well. But otherwise, the big games next week, Warhammer 40,000 Darktide has a number of people very, very excited. But the big thing, obviously, is, the Callisto Protocol, Need for Speed Unbound, and Marvel's Midnight Suns. I've been playing Marvel's Midnight Suns for the past 2 weeks now. So I will have a review of that up when the embargo lifts. It's good. I've been enjoying it, and I'm not normally a strategy guy, so it is very, very cool. But with that said, that does bring us to the end of the show. So this is the final main line show of the year. We'll be back in 2023 with a new slate of programming for the Maxi-Geek Show. Beyond that, I said we will do a special one in sort of the week before Christmas, where we'll talk about the games of the year and all that sort of stuff. But until then, because there will not be a Splinter Series stream next week, because I'm on a bit of a holiday. But until we see you online next time, happy gaming.